My name is Alex Thompson, a seasoned wildlife photographer with a passion for capturing the untamed beauty of nature. My latest assignment brought me to the rugged landscapes of Red Rock Canyon in Nevada, a place known for its breathtaking vistas and rich Native American history. Little did I know, this journey would lead me to a chilling encounter with the creature that defied explanation: Skinwalker. Red Rock Canyon, with its towering sandstone peaks and vast desert expanses, has long been a place of mystery and legend. The local Paiute tribe speaks of skinwalkers, shape-shifting witches who can transform into animals and possess malevolent powers. These stories, often dismissed as mere folklore, had always fascinated me. However, I was about to discover that some legends are rooted in a terrifying reality. I arrived in Red Rock Canyon on a warm autumn day, the sun casting a golden glow over the landscape. My plan was to spend a week in the area, photographing the wildlife and capturing the stunning scenery. I set up my base camp near a secluded part of the canyon, a spot that offered both privacy and an unobstructed view of the surrounding terrain. The first few days were uneventful, filled with the usual challenges of wildlife photography. I captured images of desert bighorn sheep, red-tailed hawks, and the elusive kit fox. The nights, however, were eerily silent, the only sounds being the occasional rustle of the wind through the canyon and the distant call of a coyote. On the fourth night, as I was reviewing my photos by the campfire, I heard a strange noise. It was a low, guttural growl, unlike anything I had ever heard before. My first thought was that it could be a mountain lion, but the sound was different, more primal, more sinister. Grabbing my flashlight and camera, I cautiously ventured out to investigate. The moon cast an ethereal light over the canyon, creating long, ominous shadows. As I moved closer to the source of the noise, I noticed a set of tracks in the sand. They were large, almost human-like, but with elongated toes and deep claw marks. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed the tracks, each step bringing a growing sense of dread. The tracks led me to a narrow ravine, a place where the walls of the canyon closed in, creating a dark, claustrophobic passage. As I entered the ravine, the temperature seemed to drop, and an unsettling silence enveloped me. I scanned the area with my flashlight, my breath visible in the cold air. Suddenly, I saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the ravine, partially obscured by the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. The creature's form shifted and contorted, its limbs elongating and contracting in a grotesque manner. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. This was no ordinary animal. Before I could react, the creature let out a bone-chilling scream. A sound that echoed through the canyon and sent a shiver down my spine. It began to move towards me, its gait unnatural and jerky, as if it was struggling to maintain its form. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my legs felt like lead. In a desperate attempt to document the encounter, I raised my camera and snapped several photos. The flash seemed to momentarily startle the creature, giving me a chance to turn and flee. I ran through the ravine, my heart pounding, the creature's footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I reached my camp, my body trembling with fear and adrenaline. Back at camp, I barricaded myself inside my tent, clutching my camera like a lifeline. The sounds of the night seemed amplified, every rustle and creak sending waves of paranoia through me. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a fitful sleep, plagued by nightmares of the creature. The next morning, I reviewed the photos on my camera. The images were blurry and distorted, but they clearly showed a tall, humanoid figure with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. I knew I had captured something extraordinary, something that defied logical explanation. Determined to learn more, I decided to seek out the wisdom of the local Paiute tribe. I traveled to a nearby reservation, where I met with an elder named Samuel Blackfoot. Samuel was a respected figure in the community, known for his deep knowledge of tribal history and legends. I showed him the photos and recounted my encounter, hoping he could shed some light on the creature I had seen. Samuel studied the photos carefully, his expression grave. "What you encountered was a skinwalker," he said, his voice low and serious. "They are powerful witches who can take the form of animals, but they are not to be trifled with. They are malevolent beings, capable of great harm." He went on to explain that skinwalkers were once human, but had chosen a dark path, gaining their powers through forbidden rituals and sacrifices. They could take the form of any animal they desired, but their true nature was always evident in their eyes, which glowed with an unnatural light. Samuel warned me that by encountering a skinwalker, I had attracted its attention, and it would not easily let me go. Determined to protect myself, I asked Samuel if there was any way to ward off the skinwalker. He provided me with a pouch of sacred herbs and a talisman, instructing me to keep them with me at all times. He also advised me to leave Red Rock Canyon immediately, as the skinwalker would likely return. Taking Samuel's advice to heart, I packed up my camp and left the canyon, my mind racing with thoughts of the encounter. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the skinwalker was lurking just out of sight, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Despite the fear and uncertainty, I knew that my encounter with the skinwalker was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, one that I had to share with the world. I wrote an article detailing my journey and the terrifying encounter, accompanied by the photos I had taken. The story garnered widespread attention, sparking debates and discussions about the existence of skinwalkers and other cryptids. For me, the encounter was a stark reminder of the mysteries that still exist in our world, hidden in the shadows and lurking in the most unexpected places. The Skinwalker of Red Rock Canyon was not just a legend, it was a real, terrifying entity that defied explanation. As I continued my work as a wildlife photographer, I carried with me the memory of that eerie night, a testament to the unknown and the extraordinary encounters that await those who dare to venture into the wild. My name is Olivia Martinez, and I've spent my life studying Native American folklore and legends. As a cultural anthropologist, I've traveled to many remote regions, documenting stories and traditions that are often overlooked by mainstream academia. One such legend, the Skinwalker, has always fascinated me. Stories of these malevolent shapeshifters are prevalent among various tribes, particularly the Navajo. My journey took me to Black Mesa in Arizona, where I hope to uncover the truth behind these chilling tales. Black Mesa is a place steeped in history and mystery. The stark beauty of the desert landscape, with its towering rock formations and expansive vistas, hides a darker, more sinister side. The local Navajo community speaks of the Skinwalker in hushed tones, describing it as a witch who can transform into any animal it desires. These creatures are said to possess incredible speed, strength, and the ability to control minds. Intrigued by these accounts, I set out to learn more. I arrived at Black Mesa in late October, the weather cool and the skies clear. The community welcomed me, though there was an undeniable undercurrent of tension when I mentioned my interest in the Skinwalker legend. I met with the respected elder named Thomas Bege, who agreed to share what he knew, albeit reluctantly. Thomas spoke of the Skinwalkers with a mixture of fear and respect. He explained that they were once medicine men or witches who had turned to the dark arts, gaining their powers through unspeakable rituals. These beings could take the form of any animal, but their true nature was often betrayed by their eyes, which retained a human-like quality. Despite the warnings, I was determined to learn more. I convinced Thomas to take me to a remote part of Black Mesa, where sightings of skinwalkers were most frequent. We traveled by jeep, the rugged terrain making the journey slow and arduous. As we drove, Thomas shared more stories of encounters with these shapeshifters, each more chilling than the last. We reached our destination as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert. Thomas pointed out a secluded area where the ground was marked with strange, twisted tracks. He explained that this was a known Skinwalker trail, a place where the creatures were often seen moving between forms. I set up my equipment, hoping to capture any evidence of the skinwalkers. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and an eerie silence settled over the mesa. The only sounds were the distant howl of a coyote and the occasional rustle of wind through the scrub. I sat by the campfire, my camera ready, the darkness pressing in around me. Thomas sat nearby, his expression wary and alert. Hours passed with no sign of the skinwalker. Just as I was beginning to doubt the tales, we heard a sound that froze us in place. It was a low, guttural growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of something moving quickly through the brush. I grabbed my camera and flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest. We followed the noise, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, we saw a figure standing at the edge of the light. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. The creature's form shifted and twisted, its limbs elongating and contracting in a grotesque manner. This was no ordinary animal, it was a skinwalker. The creature let out a bone-chilling scream, a sound that seemed to pierce the very soul. It began to move towards us, its gait jerky and unnatural, as if it was struggling to maintain its form. Thomas shouted something in Navajo, words I didn't understand, and the creature hesitated, its eyes locked on him. In that moment of hesitation, I snapped several photos, the flash momentarily startling the skinwalker. Seizing the opportunity, we turned and ran back to the jeep, the creature's footsteps echoing behind us. We didn't stop until we were safely inside the vehicle, the doors locked and the engine running. The drive back to the village was a blur of fear and adrenaline. Thomas remained silent, his face grim. When we finally reached the village, he turned to me and said, "You have seen the truth. The skinwalkers are real, but they are not to be trifled with. Leave this place, and do not return." Back in my hotel room, I reviewed the photos. The images were blurry and distorted, but they clearly showed a tall, humanoid figure with glowing eyes. I knew I had captured something extraordinary, something that defied logical explanation. I sent the photos to a colleague for analysis, hoping to gain some insight into the creature we had encountered. Over the next few days, I conducted more interviews with the local Navajo, gathering additional stories and accounts of skinwalker encounters. Each tale added another layer to the legend, painting a picture of a terrifying, malevolent force that lurked in the shadows of Black Mesa. As my time in Arizona came to an end, I couldn't shake the feeling that the skinwalker was still watching me, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Despite the fear, I knew that my encounter with the skinwalker was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, one that I had to share with the world. I wrote an article detailing my journey and the terrifying encounter, accompanied by the photos I had taken. The story garnered widespread attention, sparking debates and discussions about the existence of skinwalkers and other cryptids. For me, the encounter was a stark reminder of the mysteries that still exist in our world, hidden in the shadows and lurking in the most unexpected places. The Skinwalker of Black Mesa was not just a legend, it was a real, terrifying entity that defied explanation. As I continued my work as a cultural anthropologist, I carried with me the memory of that eerie night, a testament to the unknown and the extraordinary encounters that await those who dare to venture into the wild. My name is David Evans, and I'm an experienced hiker and outdoor enthusiast. I've trekked through some of the most remote and rugged landscapes in North America. One summer, my adventures led me to the Shadow Valley in Utah, a place known for its breathtaking scenery and, as I would soon discover, its dark, hidden secrets. Shadow Valley is located near the Navajo Nation, and the area is steeped in Native American history and legend. Before setting out, I heard whispers about the Skinwalker shape-shifting witches said to possess dark powers. The Navajo people take these stories seriously, but as an outsider, was skeptical. That was about to change. I set off on my journey in early June, with the sun high and the sky clear. My plan was to spend 10 days hiking and camping in the valley, documenting the diverse flora and fauna. I had my trusted dog, Max, with me, a German shepherd who had accompanied me on many adventures. We were well prepared for the trip, carrying enough supplies to last us comfortably. The first few days were uneventful but enjoyable. The valley was a natural paradise, filled with towering pines, rushing streams, and wildlife. I captured stunning photos of deer, eagles, and even a rare glimpse of a bobcat. Each night, I would set up camp and relax by the fire, listening to the soothing sounds of nature. On the fourth night, things began to change. As the sun set and the shadows deepened, I felt a sense of unease. Max, usually calm and vigilant, was restless, growling at the darkness beyond our camp. I tried to reassure him, but he remained on edge, his ears perked and his eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. That night, I was jolted awake by a strange noise. It was a low, guttural growl, unlike any animal I had ever encountered. Max was standing at the edge of the camp, his fur bristling and his teeth bared. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it into the darkness, but saw nothing. The noise stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The next morning, I found strange tracks around the camp. They were large and appeared to be human-like, but with elongated toes and deep claw marks. My heart raced as I recalled the stories of the Skinwalker. Could it be that these legends held some truth? I dismissed the thought and continued my hike, though a nagging sense of dread lingered. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences escalated. At night, I heard whispers and rustling sounds around my camp, as if something was watching me. Max's behavior grew increasingly erratic, and he would often stare into the distance, growling at nothing. One night, I saw a shadowy figure at the edge of the firelight. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. I froze, my heart pounding, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. On the seventh day, I decided to cut my trip short. The sense of unease had become overwhelming, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being stalked. As I packed up my camp, I heard a loud, piercing scream that echoed through the valley. It was a sound that no human or animal should be able to make, a blood-curdling cry that sent chills down my spine. I hurriedly gathered my belongings and set off towards the nearest trailhead, Max by my side. The journey was slow and tense, with every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs putting me on edge. As night fell, I set up a makeshift camp, determined to make it out of the valley by morning. That night was the worst of all. I was awakened by a rustling sound, and saw Max staring intently into the darkness, growling. I grabbed my flashlight and camera, ready to document whatever was out there. Suddenly, the Skinwalker appeared at the edge of the camp, its form shifting and contorting in the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. I snapped several photos, the flash momentarily illuminating the creature. The Skinwalker let out another bone-chilling scream and began to move towards us. Its gait was unnatural and jerky, as if it was struggling to maintain its form. Max lunged at the creature, barking fiercely. I grabbed a burning log from the fire and waved it at the Skinwalker, hoping to drive it away. The creature hesitated, its eyes locked on the fire, before retreating into the darkness. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, my mind racing with fear and adrenaline. At the first light of dawn, I packed up and set off towards the trailhead. The journey was grueling, but I was driven by the need to escape the valley and the malevolent entity that lurked within it. When I finally reached the trailhead, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I contacted the local authorities and shared my story, though I could tell they were skeptical. I also sent the photos to a colleague who specialized in cryptozoology, hoping for some insight into what I had encountered. The photos, though blurry and distorted, clearly showed a tall, humanoid figure with glowing eyes. My colleague was intrigued and shared them with other experts, sparking debates and discussions about the existence of skinwalkers and other cryptids. For me, the encounter was a stark reminder of the mysteries that still exist in our world. hidden in the shadows and lurking in the most unexpected places. As I reflected on my experience in Shadow Valley, I knew that my encounter with the Skinwalker was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, one that I had to share with the world. I wrote an article detailing my journey and the terrifying encounter, accompanied by the photos I had taken. The story garnered widespread attention, bringing the legend of the Skinwalker into the spotlight. Despite the fear and uncertainty, I continued my work as a hiker and outdoor enthusiast, always mindful of the unknown and the extraordinary encounters that await those who dare to venture into the wild. The Skinwalker of Shadow Valley was not just a legend, it was a real, terrifying entity that defied explanation, a testament to the mysteries that still remain in our world. My name is Jenna Whitefeather, and I was born and raised on a Navajo reservation in New Mexico. Growing up, I heard countless stories about the Skinwalker Seville witches that could transform into animals and wreak havoc on those who crossed their paths. These tales were part of our cultural fabric, a cautionary lore passed down through generations. I never believed them, chalking them up to superstition. That was until the night I encountered a Skinwalker myself. It was a hot July evening when I received a call from my cousin, Alex. He sounded frantic, his voice trembling with fear. "Jenna, you have to come over. Something's been stalking our sheep," he said. Alex lived on the outskirts of the reservation, where the land was more rugged and wild. I could hear the panic in his voice, and without hesitation I agreed to help. I arrived at Alex's place just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. His wife, Maria, greeted me at the door, her eyes wide with worry. "It's been happening for the past week," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "At night, we hear strange noises, and in the morning, we find our sheep mutilated." We sat in their small living room, the tension palpable. Alex explained that he had tried everything to protect his livestock, setting up traps, reinforcing the pen, even staying up all night with a rifle. But nothing worked. The attacks continued, and they were getting bolder. "Last night, I saw it," Alex said, his face pale. "It was no animal I've ever seen. It was tall, with glowing eyes, and it looked like it was wearing a coyote skin." My heart raced as I listened to Alex's story. The descriptions matched those of a Skinwalker, the shape-shifting witch of Navajo legend. Though I had always dismissed the tales, there was no denying the fear in my cousin's voice. "I'll stay the night," I said, my resolve firm. "We'll keep watch together." As the darkness enveloped the land, we took our positions near the sheep pen. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the distant howl of coyotes and the occasional rustle of wind through the scrub. We sat in silence, our senses on high alert. Hours passed, and just as I was beginning to think the night would be uneventful, we heard a low, guttural growl coming from the edge of the property. We turned our flashlights towards the noise, and there it was. A tall figure, draped in what looked like a coyote pelt, stood just beyond the fence. Its eyes glowed an unnatural yellow, and it moved with a jerky, unsettling gait. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I realized we were facing a Skinwalker. Alex raised his rifle, his hands shaking. "Get away from here," he shouted, his voice trembling. The Skinwalker responded with a chilling scream, a sound that pierced the night and sent shivers down my spine. It began to move towards us, its form shifting and contorting in the dim light. I grabbed a burning log from the fire pit and waved it at the creature, hoping to drive it away. The Skinwalker hesitated, its eyes fixed on the flames. Taking advantage of the moment, I shouted in Navajo, reciting a protection chant my grandmother had taught me. The creature let out another scream, this one filled with rage, and then it retreated into the darkness. We spent the rest of the night in a state of heightened alertness, but the Skinwalker did not return. The following morning, we found more mutilated sheep, a grim reminder of the previous night's encounter. I knew we had to do something to protect Alex and his family from this malevolent entity. I decided to visit our community's medicine man, a wise elder named Mbembe. He lived in a secluded part of the reservation, surrounded by sage and juniper. Tom listened intently as I recounted our experience, his expression serious. "The Skinwalker is a powerful and dangerous being," he said. "It will not be easy to drive it away." Tom prepared a bundle of sacred herbs and a small pouch of corn pollen. "These will help protect you," he said, handing them to me. "Sprinkle the pollen around your cousin's property and burn the herbs each night. The Skinwalker fears the purity of these elements." He also gave me a small amulet, a piece of turquoise wrapped in leather. "This is for Alex. It will protect him from the Skinwalker's influence." I thanked Tom and returned to Alex's place with the supplies. We followed the elder's instructions meticulously, creating a protective barrier around the property. Each night, we burned the herbs and recited the protection chants, the scent of sage and juniper filling the air. For several nights, there were no signs of the Skinwalker. The sheep remained unharmed, and a sense of peace began to return. However, we knew that the creature was still out there, waiting for an opportunity to strike. On the 10th night, our vigilance was put to the test. As we sat by the fire, we heard the familiar growl. The Skinwalker had returned, but this time, it was not alone. Two other figures, draped in animal pelts, emerged from the shadows. My heart pounded as I realized we were facing a pack of Skinwalkers. We stood our ground, holding the burning herbs and chanting in Navajo. The Skinwalkers circled us, their eyes glowing with malevolence. I could feel the air grow colder, the darkness pressing in around us. Just as they were about to attack, a sudden gust of wind swept through the camp, scattering the herbs and breaking the protective barrier. The Skinwalkers lunged towards us, their forms shifting and contorting. I grabbed the amulet Tom had given me and held it up, shouting the protection chant with all my might. The turquoise glowed with a bright, blue light, and the Skinwalkers recoiled, their screams echoing through the night. The creatures retreated, their forms dissolving into the darkness. The air grew still, and the temperature returned to normal. We stood there, shaken but unharmed, the amulet still glowing faintly in my hand. In the days that followed, there were no more attacks. The protective measures seemed to have worked, and the Skinwalkers were driven away. Alex and his family were safe, and the sheep were no longer in danger. The encounter with the Skinwalkers changed my perspective on the legends I had grown up with. What I once dismissed as superstition now understood to be a part of a deeper, more complex reality. The experience strengthened my bond with my heritage and the wisdom of our ancestors. I documented the encounter, sharing it with the wider community and those interested in Navajo folklore. The story garnered attention, bringing the legend of the Skinwalker to a broader audience. It served as a reminder of the mysteries that still exist in our world, hidden in the shadows and waiting to be discovered. As I continued my life on the reservation, I carried with me the memory of that terrifying night and the lessons it taught me. The Skinwalker was not just a legend, it was a real, malevolent force that demanded respect and caution. And though the danger had passed, I knew that the shadows of the desert still held many secrets, waiting for those brave enough to uncover them. My name is Sarah Miller, and I grew up in a small town on the edge of the Navajo Nation in Arizona. Life in the desert was quiet and predictable, with most of my days spent working at the local diner and evenings enjoying the brilliant sunsets. Little did I know that an encounter with an ancient evil would forever change my understanding of the world. It all started one summer evening when I was closing up the diner. The last customer had just left, and I was wiping down the counters when my friend Jake, a Navajo police officer, walked in. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his expression serious. "I need to talk to you." Jake and I had known each other since childhood, and I could tell something was bothering him. "What's up?" I asked, setting down my rag. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There have been reports of strange sightings in the desert. People are saying they've seen a creature, something that doesn't belong out there. It's been scaring the livestock and causing all sorts of trouble. My curiosity piqued. I asked him to elaborate. He told me about a series of incidents where people had heard eerie howls and seen a tall, gaunt figure moving through the desert at night. Some folks think it's a skinwalker, Jake said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I shivered at the mention of the word. The skinwalker was a shape-shifting witch from Navajo legend, capable of transforming into animals and wreaking havoc on its victims. Although I had grown up hearing these stories, I had never given them much thought. But Jake was serious, and I could see the worry in his eyes. Be careful, Sarah, he said, as he left the diner. If you see anything strange, let me know immediately. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease as I drove home. The desert, usually a place of peace and solitude, now seemed filled with hidden dangers. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something unusual: a set of tracks leading from the road to the back of my house. They were large and deep, unlike any animal tracks I had ever seen. My heart pounded as I followed the tracks around the side of the house. They led to my backyard, where I found the gate swinging open. Max, my faithful Labrador, was nowhere to be seen. Panic set in as I called out his name, but there was no response. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the desert, following the tracks. The night was dark, with only the faint glow of the moon to guide me. I called for Max, my voice echoing through the stillness. After what felt like hours, I heard a faint whimpering sound. I rushed towards it, my heart in my throat. There, in a small clearing, I found Max. He was lying on the ground, trembling and whimpering. His fur was matted, and he had a deep gash on his side. I scooped him up and hurried back to the house, my mind racing with fear and anger. What kind of creature could have done this to him? I tended to Max's wounds as best as I could and called Jake to tell him what had happened. He promised to send someone to investigate in the morning. As I sat with Max, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The night was filled with strange noises, and I kept the flashlight and a kitchen knife close at hand. The next morning, Jake and a couple of officers arrived to examine the tracks. They agreed that they were unlike anything they had seen before. We'll keep an eye on the area, Jake said, though his tone suggested that he wasn't entirely convinced they would find anything. Days passed, and the strange occurrences continued. I heard eerie howls at night and found more tracks around my property. My neighbors reported similar incidents: livestock disappearing, strange noises, and sightings of a tall, shadowy figure moving through the desert. One night, as I sat on my porch with Max, I saw it. A tall, gaunt figure, draped in what looked like animal pelts, standing at the edge of my property. Its eyes glowed an unnatural yellow, and it moved with a jerky, unsettling gait. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure let out a chilling howl and began to move towards me. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it in its direction, hoping to scare it off. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes fixed on the light. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged towards me. I ran into the house, slamming the door behind me. The creature scratched and clawed at the door, its howls echoing through the night. I called Jake, my hands shaking, and he promised to send help immediately. The scratching stopped just as suddenly as it had begun, and the night fell silent. I stayed up, clutching the flashlight and the knife, my mind racing with fear and confusion. What was this creature, and why was it targeting me? The next morning, Jake and the officers found more tracks around my property, along with deep scratches on the door. They set up a perimeter around my house and advised me to stay indoors at night. Despite their efforts, the sightings and attacks continued. One evening, determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to visit an elder in our community, a respected medicine woman named Auntie Eliza. She had a deep understanding of our traditions and the supernatural. I told her everything that had happened, hoping she could provide some insight. Auntie Eliza listened carefully, her expression grave. The Skinwalker is a powerful and dangerous being, she said. It feeds on fear and thrives in darkness. You must be strong and show no fear. There are rituals and protections we can use to drive it away. She prepared a bundle of sage and sweetgrass, instructing me to burn them each night to cleanse the area. She also gave me a small pouch of corn pollen and a turquoise amulet. These will help protect you, she said. But you must also confront the Skinwalker and show it that you are not afraid. That night, I followed Annie Eliza's instructions, burning the sage and sweetgrass and sprinkling the corn pollen around my property. I wore the turquoise amulet and recited the protection chants she had taught me. The air was filled with the soothing scent of the herbs, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm. As I sat on the porch with Max, I saw the figure again. This time, I did not run. I stood my ground, the amulet glowing faintly in my hand. The Skinwalker approached, its eyes burning with malevolence. I held up the amulet and recited the chant, my voice steady and strong. The creature let out a scream, a sound filled with rage and pain. It recoiled, its form shifting and contorting. I continued to chant, the words flowing from my lips with confidence. The Skinwalker backed away, its glowing eyes flickering with fear. Finally, with one last scream, the creature vanished into the darkness. The night fell silent, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The Skinwalker was gone, driven away by the power of our traditions and the strength of my resolve. In the days that followed, there were no more sightings or attacks. The livestock remained unharmed, and the strange noises ceased. Jake and the other officers were baffled, but I knew that the Skinwalker had been defeated. The experience changed me, deepening my respect for the ancient wisdom of our people. The Skinwalker was not just a legend, it was a real, malevolent force that had been vanquished by the power of belief and the strength of tradition. I shared my story with the community, and it served as a reminder of the importance of our heritage and the need to protect it. The desert, once a place of fear, became a symbol of resilience and strength. As I continued my life in the small town on the edge of the Navajo Nation, I carried with me the lessons I had learned. The encounter with the Skinwalker was a testament to the mysteries that still exist in our world, hidden in the shadows and waiting to be uncovered by those who are brave enough to face them. My name is Ethan Black, and I come from a long line of Navajo healers. Our family has lived near Black Mesa for generations, a place known for its rugged beauty and rich cultural history. Growing up, I was taught the sacred traditions and the old stories, including those of the Skinwalkers. Though I had never seen one myself, I respected the power and danger they represented. That respect turned into fear during the summer of 2022, when I had my first and only encounter with the Skinwalker. It all began with a series of strange occurrences on our ranch. Animals would go missing, only to be found days later, mutilated beyond recognition. Our dogs, usually brave and alert, cowered and whined at night. My grandmother, the matriarch of our family and a respected medicine woman, warned us that something dark was at work. The Skinwalker is near, she said, her eyes filled with a worry I had never seen before. Despite her warnings, I found it hard to believe that an ancient legend could be responsible for the disturbances. But my skepticism was soon shattered. One evening, as I was tending to the horses, I saw it. A tall, gaunt figure standing at the edge of the property, its eyes glowing with an eerie, yellow light. It moved with an unnatural grace, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I froze, my mind racing. I had heard the stories, but seeing it with my own eyes was a different experience altogether. The figure let out a low, guttural growl and began to move towards me. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. Just as it reached the fence, it stopped, its eyes fixed on me. Then, with a final, chilling growl, it disappeared into the night. I ran back to the house, my body trembling with fear. I told my family what I had seen, and my grandmother's expression grew even more serious. "We must act quickly," she said. "The Skinwalker is here, and it will not leave until it has taken what it wants." Over the next few days, we took every precaution. We performed protective rituals, burning sage and sweetgrass to cleanse the area. We sprinkled corn pollen around the property and wore turquoise amulets for protection. Despite our efforts, the disturbances continued. The Skinwalker seemed to grow bolder, its attacks more frequent and violent. One night, as we sat around the fire, my grandmother shared a story that had been passed down through our family for generations. "Many years ago," she began, "a powerful Skinwalker terrorized our ancestors. It was only through the combined strength and bravery of our people that it was finally defeated. They used sacred chants and rituals to drive it away, but it vowed to return one day to seek revenge." Her words sent a chill through the air, and I realized that we were facing the same creature. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. My grandmother looked at me with a fierce determination. "We must confront it head on," she said. "We must show it that we are not afraid." That night, we prepared for the confrontation. We gathered our sacred herbs, our amulets, and our courage. As the sun set, we took our positions around the property, forming a protective circle. My grandmother led us in a chant, her voice strong and unwavering. Hours passed, and just as I was beginning to think the night would be uneventful, we heard it. A low, guttural growl, followed by the rustling of leaves. The Skinwalker appeared, its eyes glowing with malevolence. It moved towards us, its form shifting and contorting in the firelight. We stood our ground, our voices growing louder as we chanted. The Skinwalker let out a piercing scream, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. It lunged towards us, but as it reached the edge of the circle, it recoiled, its body writhing in pain. My grandmother stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. She held up a burning bundle of sage and recited a powerful chant. The Skinwalker let out another scream, its form flickering and dissolving into the night. With a final, agonized howl, it vanished, leaving behind a heavy silence. The next morning, we found no traces of the Skinwalker. The disturbances ceased, and a sense of peace returned to our ranch. My grandmother explained that we had driven the creature away, but we must remain vigilant. "The Skinwalker is a powerful being," she said. "It may return one day, but we have shown it that we are strong and united." The experience changed me, deepening my respect for our traditions and the wisdom of our elders. The Skinwalker was not just a legend, it was a real, malevolent force that we had faced and defeated together. I documented the encounter, sharing it with the wider community and those interested in Navajo folklore. The story served as a reminder of the importance of our heritage and the need to protect it. As I continued my life on the ranch, I carried with me the lessons I had learned. The encounter with the Skinwalker was a testament to the mysteries that still exist in our world, hidden in the shadows and waiting to be uncovered by those who are brave enough to face them. I remained vigilant, always ready to protect my family and our land from the darkness that lurked beyond the firelight. Years passed, and the story of the Skinwalker encounter became part of our family history. It was a tale told around the fire, a reminder of the strength and courage that lay within us. The legend of the Skinwalker continued to be passed down through generations, a symbol of the enduring spirit of our people. Even today, as I sit by the fire with my own children, I tell them the story of that fateful summer. I teach them the chants and rituals, the importance of our traditions, and the strength that comes from unity. The Skinwalker may have been driven away, but its presence is a constant reminder of the power of our heritage and the resilience of our community. In the end, the encounter with the Skinwalker was more than just a battle with an ancient evil. It was a reaffirmation of our identity and the enduring strength of our culture. And though the desert remains a place of mystery and danger, it is also a place of beauty and resilience, where the spirit of our ancestors lives on, guiding and protecting us through the darkest of nights. I visited an elder named Thomas Yazzie, a respected medicine man who had lived in the area his entire life. I told him about our encounter, and he listened carefully, his expression serious. "The Skinwalker is a powerful and dangerous being," he said. "It is drawn to fear and feeds on the energy of its victims. You were fortunate to escape with your lives." Thomas explained that the Skinwalker was once a human, a witch who had used dark magic to gain the ability to shapeshift. They are often driven by jealousy, hatred, and a desire for power, he said. They can take the form of any animal, but their true form is a twisted and monstrous figure. He warned me that the Skinwalker could return, and advised me to take precautions. "You must protect yourself and your friends," he said. "Burn sage and sweetgrass to cleanse your home, and keep a piece of turquoise with you at all times. It will help to ward off the evil spirit." I followed Thomas's advice, burning sage and sweetgrass in my home, and carrying a turquoise amulet. I also shared his warnings with Jake, Lisa, and Emily, urging them to take similar precautions. Despite our efforts, the sense of unease lingered. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the growling again. My heart raced as I grabbed the amulet and my flashlight. I ventured outside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The growling grew louder, and I saw the creature standing at the edge of my yard. It was the same twisted, monstrous figure we had seen in the canyon. The Skinwalker let out a guttural growl and began to move towards me. I held up the amulet and recited the protection chant Thomas had taught me. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes flickering with uncertainty. I continued to chant, my voice steady and strong. The Skinwalker let out a piercing scream, its form flickering and contorting. With one final, agonized howl, it vanished into the night, leaving behind a heavy silence. "My name is Mark Hastings, and I live in a small town near Red Rock Canyon in Nevada. It's a quiet place, surrounded by rugged landscapes and steeped in local legends. One of the most pervasive legends is that of the Skinwalker, a shape-shifting witch from Navajo folklore. Although I had always dismissed these stories as mere superstition, an encounter I had last summer changed my perspective forever. It began during a camping trip with my friends, Jake, Lisa, and Emily. We were all nature enthusiasts, and Red Rock Canyon was one of our favorite spots. We had planned a weekend getaway, hoping to enjoy the beauty of the desert and the clear, starlit skies. On the first night, we set up camp in a secluded area, far from the usual trails. The evening was perfect, with the cool breeze and the sounds of wildlife all around us. As we sat around the campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows, the conversation inevitably turned to local legends. Jake, always the skeptic, scoffed at the idea of skinwalkers. "It's just a bunch of nonsense," he said. "There's no such thing." Emily, on the other hand, was fascinated by the stories. "I've heard some pretty creepy things," she said, her voice low. "People disappearing, strange creatures seen in the desert. You never know, there might be some truth to it." Lisa, who had grown up in the area, nodded in agreement. "My grandmother used to tell me about the Skinwalker. She said it could take the form of any animal, but its true form was a twisted, monstrous figure. She always warned me to stay away from the canyon at night." Despite the eerie stories, we all laughed it off and continued with our evening. As the fire died down, we decided to call it a night. We retreated to our tents, the desert air cool and crisp. I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the sounds of the night. I awoke to a strange noise, a low growling sound that seemed to be coming from just outside my tent. My heart raced as I listened, trying to determine if I was just imagining things. The growling grew louder, and I heard the unmistakable sound of something scratching at the fabric of my tent. I unzipped the tent flap slowly, my flashlight in hand. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at me. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The creature was tall and gaunt, its form shifting and contorting as it moved. It let out a guttural growl, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I scrambled out of the tent, shouting for my friends. Jake, Lisa, and Emily emerged from their tents, their faces pale with fear. "What the hell is that?" Jake shouted, his voice shaking. The creature stepped closer, its eyes fixed on us. Lisa screamed, and the sound seemed to agitate the beast. It lunged towards her, its movements swift and unnatural. I grabbed a burning log from the campfire and swung it at the creature, hoping to drive it away. The firelight illuminated its twisted features, and I saw the true horror of the Skinwalker. The creature recoiled, letting out a piercing scream. It backed away, its form flickering in the firelight. We watched in terror as it disappeared into the darkness, leaving us shaken and terrified. We spent the rest of the night huddled around the campfire, too afraid to sleep. The experience had left us all deeply unnerved, and we decided to pack up and leave at first light. As we drove back to town, we couldn't stop talking about what we had seen. The legend of the Skinwalker was no longer just a story, it was a terrifying reality. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The encounter had left me with more questions than answers. What was the Skinwalker, and why had it targeted us? I decided to seek out answers from the local Navajo community, hoping they could provide some insight. The next morning, I visited Thomas to tell him what had happened. He nodded, a look of satisfaction on his face. "You have shown the Skinwalker that you are not afraid," he said. "It may still return, but you have the strength and knowledge to protect yourself." In the weeks that followed, the disturbances ceased, and the sense of unease gradually faded. The encounter had left a lasting impact on me, deepening my respect for the ancient traditions and the power of belief. The legend of the Skinwalker was not just a story, it was a real, malevolent force that I had faced and defeated. I shared my experience with the community, hoping to raise awareness and encourage others to respect the old ways. The story of the Skinwalker encounter became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the hidden dangers that lurk in the shadows and the importance of staying vigilant. As time passed, I continued to explore the rugged beauty of Red Rock Canyon, but with a newfound respect for the mysteries it held. The encounter with the Skinwalker was a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring strength of our cultural heritage. Even today, as I share my story with others, I emphasize the importance of respecting the old traditions and the power they hold. The Skinwalker may be a figure from legend, but its presence is a testament to the mysteries that still exist in our world, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to face them. The experience taught me that courage, knowledge, and respect for our heritage are the keys to overcoming the darkness that lurks in the shadows. And as long as we hold on to these values, we can face any challenge that comes our way, just as we did that fateful night in Red Rock Canyon. My name is Sarah Miller, and I grew up in a small town on the edge of the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. The Pine Barrens are a vast and eerie stretch of forest, known for their dark history and numerous legends. Among the most infamous is the legend of the Jersey Devil, but there's another, more sinister creature that haunts these woods, the Skinwalker. Though tales of the Skinwalker originate from Navajo folklore, strange sightings and encounters have been reported in the Pine Barrens for decades. It was the summer of 2018 when my friends and I decided to spend a weekend camping deep in the Barrens. There were 4 of us: myself, my boyfriend Jake, and our friends Emily and Tom. We were all looking forward to a weekend of hiking, stargazing, and escaping the hustle and bustle of our daily lives. On the first day, we hiked several miles into the forest and set up camp near a small, secluded clearing. The atmosphere was peaceful, the air filled with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. As the sun began to set, we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Emily, always the storyteller, decided to share some of the local legends. "Have you ever heard about the Skinwalker sightings in the Pine Barrens?" she asked, her voice low and dramatic. We all shook our heads, intrigued. Skinwalkers are shape-shifting witches from Navajo folklore, she continued. They can transform into animals, or even take on the appearance of other people. There have been reports of strange creatures seen in these woods, creatures that don't quite fit the description of the Jersey Devil. Some people believe they're skinwalkers. Tom scoffed, his skepticism evident. It's just a bunch of stories to scare people, he said. There's no such thing as skinwalkers. Emily shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. Maybe, but there's always a kernel of truth in these legends. You never know what's really out there. We laughed it off and continued our evening, eventually retiring to our tents. As I lay in my sleeping bag, Emily's words lingered in my mind. I tried to shake off the unease and eventually drifted into a restless sleep. I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by a strange noise. It was a low, guttural growl, unlike anything I had ever heard before. My heart raced as I listened, trying to determine if I was just imagining things. The growling grew louder, and I heard the sound of something moving through the underbrush. I unzipped my tent slowly, my flashlight in hand. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at me. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The creature was tall and gaunt, its form shifting and contorting as it moved. It let out a guttural growl, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I scrambled out of the tent, shouting for my friends. Jake, Emily, and Tom emerged from their tents, their faces pale with fear. "What the hell is that?" Jake shouted, his voice shaking. The creature stepped closer, its eyes fixed on us. Emily screamed, and the sound seemed to agitate the beast. It lunged towards her, its movements swift and unnatural. I grabbed a burning log from the campfire and swung it at the creature, hoping to drive it away. The firelight illuminated its twisted features, and I saw the true horror of the skinwalker. The creature recoiled, letting out a piercing scream. It backed away, its form flickering in the firelight. We watched in terror as it disappeared into the darkness, leaving us shaken and terrified. We spent the rest of the night huddled around the campfire, too afraid to sleep. The experience had left us all deeply unnerved, and we decided to pack up and leave at first light. As we drove back to town, we couldn't stop talking about what we had seen. The legend of the Skinwalker was no longer just a story, it was a terrifying reality. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The encounter had left me with more questions than answers. What was the Skinwalker, and why had it targeted us? I decided to seek out answers from the local Native American community, hoping they could provide some insight. I visited an elder named Mary Whitefeather, a respected medicine woman who had lived in the area her entire life. I told her about our encounter, and she listened carefully, her expression serious. "The Skinwalker is a powerful and dangerous being," she said. "It is drawn to fear and feeds on the energy of its victims. You were fortunate to escape with your lives." Mary explained that the Skinwalker was once a human, a witch who had used dark magic to gain the ability to shapeshift. They are often driven by jealousy, hatred, and a desire for power, she said. They can take the form of any animal, but their true form is a twisted and monstrous figure. She warned me that the Skinwalker could return, and advised me to take precautions. "You must protect yourself and your friends," she said. "Burn sage and sweetgrass to cleanse your home, and keep a piece of turquoise with you at all times. It will help to ward off the evil spirit." I followed Mary's advice, burning sage and sweetgrass in my home, and carrying a turquoise amulet. I also shared her warnings with Jake, Emily, and Tom, urging them to take similar precautions. Despite our efforts, the sense of unease lingered. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the growling again. My heart raced as I grabbed the amulet and my flashlight. I ventured outside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The growling grew louder, and I saw the creature standing at the edge of my yard. It was the same twisted, monstrous figure we had seen in the canyon. The Skinwalker let out a guttural growl and began to move towards me. I held up the amulet and recited the protection chant Mary had taught me. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes flickering with uncertainty. I continued to chant, my voice steady and strong. The Skinwalker let out a piercing scream, its form flickering and contorting. With one final, agonized howl, it vanished into the night, leaving behind a heavy silence. The next morning, I visited Mary to tell her what had happened. She nodded, a look of satisfaction on her face. "You have shown the Skinwalker that you are not afraid," she said. "It may still return, but you have the strength and knowledge to protect yourself." In the weeks that followed, the disturbances ceased, and the sense of unease gradually faded. The encounter had left a lasting impact on me, deepening my respect for the ancient traditions and the power of belief. The legend of the Skinwalker was not just a story, it was a real, malevolent force that I had faced and defeated. I shared my experience with the community, hoping to raise awareness and encourage others to respect the old ways. The story of the Skinwalker encounter became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the hidden dangers that lurk in the shadows and the importance of staying vigilant. As time passed, I continued to explore the rugged beauty of the Pine Barrens, but with a newfound respect for the mysteries it held. The encounter with the Skinwalker was a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring strength of our cultural heritage. Even today, as I share my story with others, I emphasize the importance of respecting the old traditions and the power they hold. The Skinwalker may be a figure from legend, but its presence is a testament to the mysteries that still exist in our world, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to face them. The experience taught me that courage, knowledge, and respect for our heritage are the keys to overcoming the darkness that lurks in the shadows. And as long as we hold on to these values, we can face any challenge that comes our way, just as we did that fateful night in the Pine Barrens. My name is David Carter, and I work as a park ranger in Arizona. I've spent years patrolling the trails and overseeing the safety of visitors at Grand Canyon National Park. I've encountered many wild animals and faced numerous challenges in the rugged terrain. But nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced last fall. It started with reports of strange animal sightings in the more remote areas of the park. Campers and hikers mentioned seeing large, shadowy figures that didn't quite match the descriptions of any known wildlife. Initially, I dismissed these reports as misidentifications or exaggerated tales. But as the sightings became more frequent, I decided to investigate. One evening, just before sunset, I set out on a patrol with my partner, Mike. We decided to explore one of the less traveled trails where the most recent sightings had been reported. The air was cool, and the forest was bathed in a golden light as we made our way deeper into the woods. As we walked, Mike and I chatted about the usual topics: work, family, weekend plans, but there was an underlying tension in the air. We both felt it, an unsettling sense that something was watching us. The forest was unusually quiet, and the familiar sounds of wildlife were conspicuously absent. We reached a clearing where we decided to take a break. I scanned the area with my binoculars, looking for any signs of movement. That's when I saw a tall, dark figure standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the trees. I nudged Mike and pointed it out to him. He squinted, trying to make out what it was. "Could be a bear," he whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. We approached cautiously, keeping our distance. As we got closer, the figure moved, stepping out from behind the trees. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a bear, it was something much more terrifying. The creature was humanoid, but distorted, with elongated limbs and a hunched posture. Its skin was a mottled gray, and its eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light. It let out a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. "Skinwalker," Mike whispered, his voice trembling. I had heard of skinwalkers before, shape-shifting witches from Navajo legend, but I had never believed they were real. Now, standing face to face with this creature, I had no choice but to accept the horrifying reality. The Skinwalker took a step toward us, and we both instinctively backed away. It moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes never leaving us. I fumbled for my radio, desperately trying to call for backup. But the creature let out a piercing scream that seemed to disrupt the signal. "We need to get out of here," Ike said, his voice urgent. We turned and ran, our hearts pounding in our chests. The Skinwalker followed, its movements swift and silent. I could hear it behind us, its guttural growls growing louder. We reached a rocky outcrop and scrambled up, hoping to put some distance between us and the creature. From our vantage point, we could see the Skinwalker pacing below, its yellow eyes scanning the area. It let out another scream, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. We were trapped. Mike and I exchanged a look, and I could see the fear in his eyes. "We need to fight back," he said, his voice shaking. "It's our only chance." I nodded, trying to steady my trembling hands. We grabbed some large rocks and prepared to defend ourselves. As the Skinwalker approached, we hurled the rocks at it, hoping to drive it away. The creature dodged the rocks with ease, its movements almost fluid. It lunged at us, its clawed hands reaching out. I swung a rock at its head, and it let out a pained howl, staggering back. Mike and I took the opportunity to scramble down the other side of the outcrop, putting more distance between us and the creature. We ran for what felt like hours, the forest around us growing darker. The Skinwalker's screams echoed through the trees, a constant reminder that it was still hunting us. We finally reached a small cave and ducked inside, hoping to find some refuge. Inside the cave, we caught our breath, listening for any signs of the creature. The silence was deafening, and I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. Mike lit a small fire, and the flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the cave walls. "We need to stay here until morning," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Skinwalkers are more active at night. If we can make it through the night, we might have a chance." We sat in silence, the fear and exhaustion weighing heavily on us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the Skinwalker was just outside, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the hours passed, I found myself drifting in and out of sleep, my dreams filled with nightmarish visions of the creature. At some point, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside the cave. My heart raced as I nudged Mike awake. He listened for a moment, then grabbed a stick from the fire, holding it like a weapon. We crept to the entrance of the cave, peering out into the darkness. The footsteps grew louder, and we saw a figure approaching. It was a park ranger, one of our colleagues. Relief washed over me as I recognized him. "Thank God," I muttered, stepping out of the cave. "Joe, is that you?" Mike called out. The figure stopped, turning to look at us. For a moment, everything seemed normal. But then, I noticed something off. Joe's eyes were glowing yellow. "It's not him," I whispered, my voice trembling. The Skinwalker let out a guttural growl, its form shifting and contorting. It lunged at us, and we scrambled back into the cave, desperately trying to hold it off. The creature's strength was overwhelming, and I could feel it closing in on us. In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed the stick from the fire and thrust it at the creature. The flames licked at its skin, and it let out a pained howl, retreating into the darkness. We didn't wait to see if it would come back. We ran, our fear propelling us forward. We finally emerged from the forest, exhausted and shaken. Our colleagues were waiting for us, having received our earlier distress call. We recounted our encounter, and they listened in stunned silence. The experience left a lasting impact on me. I continued my work as a park ranger, but with a newfound respect for the legends and the unknown dangers that lurk in the wild. The encounter with the Skinwalker was a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of respecting the old ways. Even today, as I share my story with others, I emphasize the importance of respecting the old traditions and the power they hold. The Skinwalker may be a figure from legend, but its presence is a testament to the mysteries that still exist in our world. waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to face them. The experience taught me that courage, knowledge, and respect for our heritage are the keys to overcoming the darkness that lurks in the shadows. And as long as we hold on to these values, we can face any challenge that comes our way, just as we did that fateful night in the Arizona wilderness. My name is Maria Torres, and I've lived in a small town in New Mexico my entire life. Our town, though quaint and tight-knit, sits on the edge of a vast, desolate desert. Stories of supernatural beings are part of our folklore, passed down from generation to generation. Among these tales, one stood out for its chilling details: the legend of the Skinwalker. Growing up, I never took these stories seriously. They were just spooky tales meant to keep kids from wandering too far into the desert. But that all changed one evening when I was in my early 20s. It was the summer of 2015, and I had recently moved back home after finishing college. My family owned a small ranch on the outskirts of town, and I often helped my parents with the chores. One hot, dusty evening, my parents had gone into town for supplies, leaving me alone to take care of the ranch. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. I finished feeding the animals and decided to take a walk to clear my mind. As I strolled along the old canyon road, the air grew cooler and the sky transitioned from a brilliant orange to a deep indigo. I reached a point where the road narrowed, flanked by towering rock formations. It was a beautiful, albeit eerie place. I was lost in thought when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned, expecting to see a stray dog, or perhaps a coyote, but there was nothing there. I shook off the feeling of unease and continued walking. A few minutes later, I heard the rustling again, followed by a low growl. This time, my heart pounded in my chest as I turned around, my flashlight sweeping across the rocky terrain. At first, I saw nothing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. Standing about 50 yards away was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was tall and gaunt, with pale, mottled skin, and glowing yellow eyes. Its form seemed to shift and contort as it moved, making it difficult to focus on its exact shape. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what I was seeing: a skinwalker. I backed away slowly, my mind racing with fear. The creature let out another low growl and began to advance toward me. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding against the dusty road. The skinwalker's footsteps echoed behind me, growing louder with each passing second. I reached the ranch and slammed the door shut behind me, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I grabbed the phone and called my parents, but the line was dead. Desperation set in as I realized I was completely alone, with no way to call for help. The skinwalker was outside, circling the house. I could hear its guttural growls and the sound of its claws scraping against the walls. My mind raced, trying to remember anything I could about how to ward off a skinwalker. My grandmother had once told me that they feared certain herbs and symbols, but in my panic, I couldn't recall the specifics. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a handful of salt, throwing it at the windows and doors. I remembered hearing that salt could create a barrier against evil spirits. As I did this, I caught sight of the creature through the window. It was staring at me with those eerie yellow eyes, its form shifting and twisting in the dim light. The skinwalker let out a blood-curdling scream, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. I backed away, clutching a kitchen knife for protection. The creature continued to circle the house, its growls growing louder and more menacing. In a moment of clarity, I remembered a prayer my grandmother had taught me. It was an old Navajo chant meant to ward off evil spirits. I closed my eyes and began to recite the prayer, my voice trembling, but growing stronger with each word. As I chanted, the skinwalker's growls grew more frantic. It slammed against the walls of the house, trying to break through. But the power of the prayer seemed to hold it at bay. I continued to chant, my voice steady and determined. Finally, the creature let out one last, agonized scream and vanished into the night. The air grew still, and a profound silence settled over the ranch. I collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but relieved. My parents returned shortly after, and I recounted the terrifying encounter. They listened in stunned silence, their faces pale with fear. My father immediately took steps to protect the house, placing protective symbols and herbs around the property. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The experience had left me deeply unnerved, and I found it difficult to return to my normal routine. I sought out the wisdom of the local Navajo elders, hoping they could provide some insight and guidance. One elder, woman named Elaine, listened to my story with a grave expression. She told me that skinwalkers were powerful witches who could take the form of animals or other people. They were driven by dark magic and often sought to harm those who crossed their path. Elena gave me a small pouch filled with sacred herbs and a turquoise amulet. "Keep these with you at all times," she said. "They will help to protect you from the skinwalkers' evil." I followed her advice, carrying the amulet and herbs wherever I went. Over time, the sense of unease began to fade, and I started to feel safe again. But the memory of that night remained, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked in the desert. I continued to share my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the old traditions. The legend of the Skinwalker was no longer just a tale to me, it was a real and terrifying presence that I had faced and survived. The experience taught me the importance of courage, knowledge, and respect for our cultural heritage. These values were the keys to overcoming the darkness and protecting ourselves from the unknown. Even today, as I go about my daily life, I carry the lessons I learned from that night. The Skinwalker may still be out there, but I am no longer afraid. I know that I have the strength and the wisdom to face whatever challenges come my way, just as I did that fateful evening on Canyon Road. My name is Evan Daniels, and I work as a tour guide in Utah, leading adventure seekers and nature enthusiasts through some of the most breathtaking landscapes in the American Southwest. The rugged beauty of Black Rock Canyon has always been one of my favorite places to explore. It's a place of awe-inspiring rock formations, hidden caves, and ancient petroglyphs that tell the stories of the people who once lived there. But there are also stories of more sinister things lurking in the shadows. Tales of skinwalkers that have been passed down through generations. One summer, a group of college friends booked a weekend tour, eager to experience the canyon's splendor. They were a lively bunch: Jake, Sarah, Mike, and Emily, full of enthusiasm and curiosity. We set out early on a Friday morning, our backpacks loaded with supplies, ready for a 2-night camping trip in the heart of Black Rock Canyon. The first day was perfect. We hiked along scenic trails, marveling at the towering rock formations and the vibrant desert flora. By evening, we had set up camp near a small, secluded creek. We spent the night sharing stories around the campfire, the laughter and camaraderie creating a sense of warmth and security. But as the fire died down and the night grew darker, a chilling breeze swept through the canyon, and the sense of isolation became palpable. I was the last to fall asleep, staring up at the star-filled sky, my thoughts wandering to the old legends of the canyon. The idea of skinwalkers had always intrigued me, but I had never taken the story seriously. That night, however, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The next day, we continued our exploration, visiting an ancient cliff dwelling that had been abandoned for centuries. The students were fascinated by the petroglyphs and the remnants of the past. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the canyon, we decided to head back to camp. We arrived just as dusk was settling in, and Sarah mentioned feeling a bit uneasy. "It feels like someone's been following us," she said, her voice tinged with nervous laughter. Jake dismissed her concerns with a grin. "Probably just your imagination, Sarah. This place can be a bit creepy at night." But I couldn't ignore the feeling of unease that had been growing since the previous night. As we gathered around the campfire for dinner, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. The canyon, usually filled with the sounds of nocturnal wildlife, was eerily silent. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. At first, I thought one of the students had gone for a midnight walk, but the footsteps were too heavy, too deliberate. I lay still, listening intently, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps circled the camp, stopping occasionally, as if whatever it was inspecting our tents. I reached for my flashlight and unzipped the tent slowly, trying not to make a sound. When I stepped outside, I saw a tall, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the camp, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I was looking at a skinwalker. The stories I had heard all my life came rushing back to me, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. The creature let out a low, guttural growl, and began to move toward me. I backed away, stumbling over my own feet, and called out to the others. "Wake up! We need to get out of here!" The students scrambled out of their tents, groggy and confused. "What's going on?" Mike asked, rubbing his eyes. "There's something out there," I said, my voice trembling. "We need to leave now." The skinwalker let out a chilling scream, and the students' faces went pale. We grabbed our backpacks and started to run, not bothering to pack up the tents. The creature followed, its movements swift and unnatural, as it pursued us through the canyon. We ran for what felt like hours, our fear propelling us forward. The skinwalker's screams echoed through the canyon, a constant reminder that it was still on our trail. We finally reached a narrow ravine where we decided to take refuge. The walls of the ravine were steep and rocky, offering some protection from the creature. We huddled together, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. "What the hell was that?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. "A skinwalker," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need to stay quiet and hope it doesn't find us." The night seemed to stretch on forever, as we sat in the darkness, listening for any signs of the creature. The canyon was deathly silent, and every rustle of the wind sent shivers down my spine. I tried to keep my fear in check, reminding myself that skinwalkers were just legends. But the reality of what we had seen was impossible to ignore. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the ravine, we cautiously emerged from our hiding place. The canyon looked serene and peaceful, a stark contrast to the terror of the night before. We made our way back to camp, our steps wary and our senses on high alert. When we reached the campsite, we found our tents shredded and our supplies scattered. The sight sent a fresh wave of fear through me. The skinwalker had clearly been here, searching for us. "We need to leave," I said, my voice firm. "It's not safe here." We packed up what little we could salvage and began the trek back to the trailhead. The journey was long and grueling, but we were driven by a sense of urgency and the need to put as much distance between ourselves and the canyon as possible. When we finally reached the trailhead, we were exhausted, but relieved to be out of the canyon. We reported the encounter to the authorities, but they were skeptical. The official explanation was that we had encountered a wild animal, but we knew better. The experience left a lasting mark on all of us. The students returned to their lives, but they never forgot what they had seen. As for me, I continued my work as a tour guide, but I approached the canyon with a newfound respect and caution. The legend of the Skinwalker was no longer just a story to me. It was a reminder of the mysteries and dangers that still exist in our world, hidden in the shadows and waiting to be discovered by those brave enough or unlucky enough to encounter them. To this day, I share my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the old traditions and the unknown forces that inhabit the wild places of our world. The experience taught me the importance of vigilance, respect, and the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most terrifying challenges. The Skinwalker may still haunt the depths of Black Rock Canyon, but I know that I have the strength and wisdom to face whatever comes my way. And as long as I carry that knowledge with me, I am prepared for whatever the future holds. My name is Leah Foster, and I've always been drawn to the wilderness. As a park ranger in Arizona, my job is to protect the natural beauty of the land and ensure the safety of those who come to explore it. But no amount of training could have prepared me for the night I encountered the Skinwalkers of Shadow Creek. It was late fall, and the days were growing shorter. The air had a crisp bite to it, and the leaves had turned vibrant shades of red and gold. I was assigned to patrol a remote area of the park that hadn't seen much activity in years. Shadow Creek was known for its dense forests and winding trails, a place of serene beauty that felt untouched by time. That day, I received a call about a group of campers who had gone missing near Shadow Creek. They were experienced hikers, well prepared for the trip, which made their sudden disappearance all the more alarming. I set out immediately, determined to find them before nightfall. The sun was beginning to set as I reached the trailhead. I checked my GUR flashlight, radio, first aid kit and set off along the path. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. As I ventured deeper into the woods, a sense of unease settled over me. I followed the trail for several miles until I came across a campsite. The tents were still there, but the place was in disarray. Backpacks were strewn about, and the remnants of a campfire smoldered in the center. It looked like the campers had left in a hurry. I called out, hoping for a response, but the forest remained silent. I began to search the area, looking for any signs of what might have happened. As I sifted through their belongings, I found a journal. The last entry was chilling. "We saw something in the woods tonight. It's not an animal, I don't know what it is, but we need to leave." My heart raced as I read the words. I knew the stories about Skinwalker shape-shifting witches who could take on the form of animals or people. They were said to be able to control the weather, possess supernatural strength, and move with incredible speed. But I had always considered them to be just that, stories. I decided to follow the trail leading away from the campsite, hoping to find the campers before it was too late. The path wound through dense thickets and over rocky terrain. As night fell, the forest took on a more sinister feel. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and every rustle of leaves set my nerves on edge. I was about a mile from the campsite when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. I stopped in my tracks, my flashlight sweeping through the trees. At first, I saw nothing. Then, just beyond the beam of light, I caught a glimpse of a figure. It was tall and gaunt, with glowing red eyes that pierced the darkness. Its form seemed to shift and waver, as if it couldn't decide what shape to take. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I was looking at a skinwalker. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. The creature let out another growl, this one louder and more menacing. I turned and ran, my flashlight bouncing wildly in the darkness. The skinwalker gave chase, its footsteps echoing through the forest. I could hear it gaining on me, its growls growing closer. Panic surged through me as I ran faster, my lungs burning with the effort. I knew I couldn't outrun it, so I needed to find a place to hide. I spotted a large fallen tree and dove behind it, pressing myself against the ground. The skinwalker stopped, its glowing eyes scanning the area. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't find me. After what felt like an eternity, it let out a frustrated growl and moved on, disappearing into the darkness. I waited several minutes before emerging from my hiding place, my heart still pounding in my chest. I needed to find the campers and get out of the forest. I continued along the trail, moving as quietly as possible. About half a mile later, I found them. They were huddled together in a small clearing, their faces pale with fear. "Leah," one of them cried out when they saw me. "Thank God you're here. We need to get out of here," I said, my voice steady despite the fear that gripped me. "Now, we made our way back along the trail, sticking close together. The campers told me about the creature they had seen, how it had chased them through the forest. They had managed to lose it, but they were too afraid to move any further. As we neared the campsite, we heard the growl again. The skinwalker had found us. We broke into a run, the creature hot on our heels. We could see the lights of the campsite ahead, but the Skinwalker was closing in. Just as we reached the edge of the clearing, the Skinwalker lunged at us. I turned and fired a shot from my service weapon, the sound echoing through the forest. The creature let out a scream and fell back, giving us just enough time to reach the tents. We barricaded ourselves inside one of the tents, hoping it would be enough to keep the Skinwalker out. The creature circled the tent, its growls sending shivers down our spines. It scratched at the fabric, trying to tear its way in. I reached for my radio and called for backup, my voice trembling. "This is Ranger Foster. We need immediate assistance at Shadow Creek. There's something out here. We need help." The response was quick. "Hang tight, Leah. We're sending a team your way. Hold on." The next few minutes felt like hours as we waited for help to arrive. The Skinwalker continued its assault on the tent, but the fabric held. Finally, we heard the sound of approaching vehicles and the voices of fellow rangers. The Skinwalker let out one last, furious scream before disappearing into the night. The rangers helped us out of the tent and escorted us back to the trailhead. We were shaken, but unharmed. The incident was reported, but the official explanation was vague. They said we had likely encountered a wild animal, but I knew the truth. The Skinwalker was real, and it was out there, lurking in the shadows of Shadow Creek. I returned to my duties, but I was never the same. The experience had changed me, made me more cautious and aware of the dangers that could be lurking in the wilderness. I shared my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the old legends. The Skinwalker may still be out there, but I know that I am prepared to face whatever challenges come my way. The wilderness is a place of beauty and danger, and it demands respect. And as long as I carry that respect with me, I am ready for whatever the future holds. My name is David Ruiz, and I've spent most of my life in the deserts of New Mexico. As an amateur archaeologist and historian, always been fascinated by the rich cultural tapestry of the Southwest, where ancient legends and modern life intertwine. But my interest in these legends took a dark turn during an expedition to an isolated part of the desert known as the Whispering Dunes. It started with a tip from a colleague about a series of petroglyphs that had recently been uncovered by a sandstorm. These carvings, he said, could provide new insights into the lives of the ancestral Pueblones. Intrigued, I decided to investigate, bringing along my friend and fellow researcher, Carla Mendoza. We arrived at the Whispering Dunes in the early morning, the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon. The desert was eerily silent, the only sounds the occasional gust of wind and the crunch of sand under our boots. The petroglyphs were located in a remote canyon, far from any trails or roads. As we made our way to the site, Carla and I discussed the legends that surrounded this area. The most persistent was the story of the Skinwalker shape-shifting witches, who could assume the forms of animals or even other people. According to the tales, they could control the weather, possess supernatural strength, and move with incredible speed. These stories were often dismissed as mere folklore, but they had a way of lingering in the back of one's mind. When we reached the canyon, we found the petroglyphs just as described, intricate carvings that depicted scenes of daily life, spiritual rituals, and, disturbingly, images of what appeared to be skinwalkers. The figures were tall and menacing, their eyes depicted as glowing orbs. Carla took out her camera and began documenting the carvings while I examined them more closely. The detail was astonishing, and the artistry suggested a deep significance. As I traced the lines with my fingers, I felt a sudden chill, as if a cold wind had swept through the canyon. But the air was still. "Do you feel that?" I asked Carla, who was busy photographing a particularly detailed section. She looked up, puzzled. "Feel what?" "Never mind," I said, shaking off the uneasy feeling. "Let's keep going." We spent the next several hours studying the petroglyphs, piecing together the stories they told. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the heat became oppressive, and we decided to take a break in the shade of a nearby rock formation. As we sat there, eating our lunch and discussing our findings, we heard a strange sound. It was a low, guttural growl, unlike anything I had ever heard in the desert. We exchanged nervous glances. "Probably just a coyote," Carla said, though she didn't sound convinced. We continued our work, but the sense of unease grew stronger. The carvings seemed to take on a life of their own, their eyes following us as we moved. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. By late afternoon, we had documented most of the petroglyphs and decided to head back to our camp. As we packed up our gear, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the canyon. "Did you see that?" I asked, pointing to where the figure had been. Carla turned, her eyes narrowing. "See what?" "There was someone there, watching us." "David, it's just your imagination," she said, though she looked uneasy. "Let's get out of here." We made our way back to camp, the desert silence now feeling oppressive. As night fell, we set up our tents and built a small fire. The stars were brilliant against the dark sky, but their beauty did little to ease the tension. As we sat by the fire, the growling sound returned, closer this time. We both stood, scanning the darkness. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the sand. "Stay close," I said, reaching for my flashlight. We moved slowly around the perimeter of our camp, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The growling grew louder, more insistent, and then we saw them, three figures standing just beyond the light, their eyes glowing a sickly yellow. "Skinwalkers," Carla whispered, her voice trembling. The figures moved closer, their shapes shifting and changing. One moment, they appeared as tall, gaunt humans. The next as large, predatory animals. They advanced slowly, their eyes never leaving us. "We need to get out of here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We grabbed our backpacks and started to move, but the skinwalkers blocked our path. They circled us, their growls echoing in the night. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but I knew we had to stay calm. "Let's head for the canyon," I said. "Maybe we can lose them there." We moved quickly, the skinwalkers following close behind. The canyon loomed ahead, its dark entrance like a maw waiting to swallow us whole. We ran, the growls of the skinwalkers growing louder, more frenzied. As we entered the canyon, the walls closed in around us, the darkness almost complete. I switched on my flashlight, the beam revealing the petroglyphs we had studied earlier. The carvings seemed to pulse with an eerie light, their eyes glowing in the darkness. We stumbled through the canyon, the skinwalkers' growls echoing off the walls. Suddenly, one of them lunged at us, its claws slashing through the air. I swung my flashlight, hitting it across the face. The creature let out a scream and fell back, giving us a moment to run. We reached a narrow passage and squeezed through, the skinwalkers hot on our heels. The passage opened into a small, enclosed area with a single large rock in the center. We climbed onto the rock, hoping it would offer some protection. The skinwalkers circled the rock, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They let out a series of guttural growls, and I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I knew we couldn't stay there forever. "We need to fight back," Carla said, her voice shaking but determined. "We can't let them win." I nodded, gripping my flashlight tightly. "On three," I said. 1, 2, 3. We jumped off the rock, swinging our flashlights and shouting as loudly as we could. The skinwalkers recoiled, their forms shifting and changing. For a moment, it looked like they might retreat, but then they lunged at us again. I swung my flashlight, connecting with one of the skinwalkers' heads. It let out a scream and fell to the ground, its form dissolving into a cloud of smoke. Carla was fighting off another, using her backpack as a shield. I joined her, and together we managed to drive it back. The last skinwalker hesitated, its eyes glowing with a mix of rage and fear. It let out a final, chilling growl before retreating into the darkness. We stood there, panting and trembling, the canyon eerily silent once more. The petroglyphs seemed to watch us, their eyes glowing faintly. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We made our way back through the canyon, the darkness pressing in around us. When we finally emerged into the open desert, we collapsed to the ground, exhausted and shaken. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We kept the fire burning brightly, staying vigilant until the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. As soon as it was light enough, we packed up our camp and left the Whispering Dunes, vowing never to return. The experience left a lasting mark on both of us. We reported the encounter to the authorities, but they were skeptical, attributing our ordeal to wild animals or hallucinations. But Carla and I knew the truth. The Skinwalkers were real, and they were still out there, lurking in the shadows of the desert. We continued our work as archaeologists, but we never forgot the night we faced the Skinwalkers of Shadow Creek. The experience taught us to respect the legends and the unknown forces that inhabit our world. To this day, I share my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the old traditions. The wilderness is a place of beauty and danger, and it demands respect. And as long as I carry that respect with me, I am ready for whatever the future holds. My name is Ethan Wells, and for as long as I can remember, I've loved the outdoors. Growing up in the rugged landscapes of Utah, I developed a deep appreciation for nature. I became a wildlife photographer, hoping to capture the beauty of the wilderness and share it with the world. Little did I know that one trip would bring me face to face with a legend I never thought was real, the Skinwalker. It was early spring when I received a tip about a secluded valley known as Hollow Creek. The area was rich in wildlife, and I was eager to explore it. My friend and fellow photographer, Jake Thompson, decided to join me. We packed our gear and set off for a week-long expedition. Hollow Creek was remote, far from any roads or trails. We hiked for hours, our packs heavy with camping equipment and camera gear. The deeper we ventured into the valley, the more isolated it felt. The towering pines and jagged cliffs seemed to close in around us, creating a sense of foreboding. We set up camp near a small, crystal-clear stream that wound its way through the valley. As we unpacked, Jake mentioned a story he'd heard from a local Navajo elder about the area. According to the elder, Hollow Creek was a place of power inhabited by Skinwalker shape-shifting witches who could assume the forms of animals or people. I laughed it off, chalking it up to superstition. But Jake looked serious. "Ethan, I've heard these stories my whole life. People swear they've seen them." "Come on, Jake," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "We're here to photograph wildlife, not chase ghost stories." We spent the first few days exploring the valley, capturing stunning images of elk, deer, and a variety of bird species. The weather was perfect, and the scenery was breathtaking. But as the sun set each evening, an uneasy feeling settled over me. The forest grew silent, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. On the fourth night, we decided to hike to a nearby ridge to photograph the sunset. The view from the top was spectacular, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. As the light faded, we packed up our gear and started back to camp. The trail was narrow and winding, the trees pressing in on either side. The darkness was complete, our flashlights the only source of light. As we walked, we heard a sound, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, his voice trembling. I nodded, gripping my flashlight tighter. "Probably just a coyote," I said, though I didn't believe it. We continued walking, but the growl followed us, growing louder and more menacing. Then we saw it, a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness, watching us from the trees. I felt a wave of fear wash over me as the creature stepped into the light. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It stood on two legs, but its body was covered in fur. Its face was a twisted mix of human and animal features, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It let out another growl, and I knew we were in serious trouble. "Run!" I shouted, and we took off down the trail, our flashlights bobbing wildly in the darkness. The creature gave chase, its footsteps echoing through the forest. I could hear its growls growing closer, and I pushed myself to run faster. We burst into our campsite, scrambling to find some semblance of safety. Jake grabbed a stick from the fire and waved it at the creature, trying to keep it at bay. The Skinwalker stopped at the edge of the light, its eyes fixed on us. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "Now!" We grabbed our packs and ran, not daring to look back. The Skinwalker followed, its growls echoing in the night. We reached the stream and followed it, hoping it would lead us to safety. The creature stayed close, its eyes never leaving us. Hours passed, and we were exhausted. We found a small cave and ducked inside, hoping it would provide some protection. The Skinwalker paced outside, its growls filling the air. We huddled together, trying to stay quiet. "We can't stay here," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It will find a way in." "We need a plan," I said, my mind racing. "Maybe we can trap it, or scare it off." We spent the rest of the night planning our escape. As dawn approached, the Skinwalker finally retreated, disappearing into the forest. We waited until the sun was fully up before emerging from the cave, our nerves frayed. We made our way back to camp, hoping the creature was gone for good. But as we packed up our gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching us. We hiked out of the valley as quickly as we could, never looking back. The experience left a lasting mark on both of us. We reported the encounter to the authorities, but they were skeptical, attributing our ordeal to wild animals or hallucinations. But Jake and I knew the truth. The Skinwalkers were real, and they were still out there, lurking in the shadows of Hollow Creek. We continued our work as photographers, but we never forgot the night we faced the Skinwalkers. The experience taught us to respect the legends and the unknown forces that inhabit our world. To this day, I share my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the old traditions. The wilderness is a place of beauty and danger, and it demands respect. And as long as I carry that respect with me, I am ready for whatever the future holds. My name is Sarah Green, and I grew up hearing stories of the supernatural. My grandmother, a full-blooded Navajo, would often regale us with tales of Skinwalker-swicked beings with the power to transform into any animal they desired. As a child, I found these stories thrilling, but as I grew older, I dismissed them as mere folklore. That was until a summer trip to the Navajo Nation changed everything. I was 25 and working as an ethnographer, studying the cultural practices and traditions of various Native American tribes. My latest assignment brought me to the Navajo Nation in northeastern Arizona. I planned to spend several months there, interviewing elders and documenting their stories. I stayed in a small, remote village called Red Mesa. It was a tight-knit community, steeped in tradition and wary of outsiders. My host was an elderly woman named Elsie Yazzie, who welcomed me into her home with open arms. Elsie was a respected matriarch and a repository of tribal knowledge. She agreed to help me with my research and introduce me to other elders in the community. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elsie and I sat on her porch, sipping herbal tea. The air was warm, and the sky was painted with hues of orange and purple. I took the opportunity to ask her about the Skinwalker legends. "Elsie, can you tell me more about the Skinwalkers? Are they just stories, or is there some truth to them?" I asked, trying to sound respectful. Elsie's expression turned serious. "Sarah, the Skinwalkers are real. They are not just stories. They are dangerous beings who practice witchcraft and can take on the form of animals. We do not speak of them lightly." Her tone sent a shiver down my spine. "Have you ever encountered one?" She nodded slowly. Many years ago, when I was a young woman, had an encounter that I will never forget. It is not something I speak of often, but I will tell you if you promise to be careful. I promised, and Elsie began her story. She told me of a night when she and a group of friends were camping near a place called Dead Man's Ridge. They had heard strange noise holes and growls that seemed to come from nowhere. When they returned to their village, they found strange tracks around their campsite. The elders told them they had encountered a skinwalker. As Elsie spoke, I felt a growing sense of unease. Her story was so vivid, so filled with genuine fear, that it was impossible to dismiss. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the Skinwalker legends than I had thought. A few weeks later, I decided to visit Dead Man's Ridge to see if I could find any clues to support Elsie's story. I brought along my camera, a notebook, and a voice recorder, hoping to document my findings. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not wanting to alarm the villagers. The hike to Dead Man's Ridge was challenging, the terrain rugged and unforgiving. The closer I got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air felt thick, and the silence was eerie. I reached the ridge just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. I set up my equipment and began exploring the area, taking photos and recording my observations. As darkness fell, I felt a growing sense of unease. The sounds of the forest seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence. Suddenly, I heard a low growl. I turned, my heart pounding, but saw nothing. The growl came again, closer this time. I shone my flashlight into the darkness, and my blood ran cold. There, at the edge of the light, was a pair of glowing eyes. I backed away slowly, my flashlight shaking. The eyes moved closer, and I could make out the shape of a large, wolf-like creature. It stood on two legs, its eyes burning with an unnatural light. I realized with horror that I was facing a skinwalker. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature gave chase, its growls echoing through the night. I stumbled through the forest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the skinwalker behind me, its footsteps growing louder. I reached a clearing and paused to catch my breath. The skinwalker emerged from the trees, its eyes fixed on me. I remembered Elsie's words and decided to face it head on. I picked up a stick and held it out in front of me, trying to look as threatening as possible. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice trembling. The skinwalker paused, its eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought it might retreat, but then it lunged at me. I swung the stick, hitting it across the face. The creature let out a scream and fell back, giving me a chance to run. I ran until I could no longer hear the skinwalker's growls. Exhausted and terrified, I found a small cave and crawled inside, hoping it would provide some protection. I spent the night huddled in the darkness, every sound making me jump. When dawn finally broke, I emerged from the cave, my body aching and my nerves frayed. I made my way back to Red Mesa, vowing never to return to Dead Man's Ridge. I told Elsie what had happened, and she nodded solemnly. "You are lucky to be alive, Sarah. The skinwalkers are not to be taken lightly." I spent the rest of my time in the Navajo Nation with a new sense of respect for the legends and traditions. The experience left a lasting mark on me, and I continued my research with a renewed sense of purpose. My name is John Parker, and I live in a small town in southern Colorado. My family has owned Blackwood Ranch for generations. It's a sprawling property nestled between the rugged peaks of the Rockies and the expansive, open plains. Life on the ranch has always been peaceful, filled with hard work and the simple joys of nature. But one summer night, that peace was shattered in a way I never could have imagined. It was late July, and the days were long and hot. We were in the middle of calving season, and every night, my brother Mike and I took turns checking on the herd. It was my turn that night, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saddled up my horse, Duke, and set off toward the western pasture. The air was thick with the scent of hay and the distant sounds of crickets and frogs. The full moon cast a pale glow over the landscape, making it easy to navigate without a flashlight. I rode slowly, scanning the shadows for any signs of trouble. As I approached the pasture, I noticed something unusual. The cows, normally calm and docile, were agitated. They milled about nervously, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. Duke snorted and shifted uneasily beneath me, sensing something was amiss. I dismounted and tied Duke to the fence, then approached the herd. That's when I heard Ida low, guttural growl that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I turned slowly, my heart pounding, and saw a figure lurking at the edge of the trees. At first, I thought it was a wolf. But as it stepped into the moonlight, I realized it was something far more terrifying. It stood on two legs, its body covered in matted fur. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its face was a twisted blend of human and animal features. I knew instantly what it was: a skinwalker. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. The stories I'd heard as a child came flooding back. Skinwalkers were powerful and dangerous, witches who could assume the form of any animal they chose. They were said to be nearly impossible to kill, and were known for their cunning and malice. The skinwalker let out another growl and took a step toward me. I glanced around, looking for anything could use to defend myself. My eyes landed on a length of rope hanging from the fence. I grabbed it, hoping it might offer some protection. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice trembling. The skinwalker paused, its eyes narrowing. For a moment, I thought it might retreat. But then it lunged at me with incredible speed. I swung the rope, hitting it across the face. The creature let out a scream and fell back, giving me a chance to run. I sprinted toward Duke, my heart pounding in my chest. The skinwalker was right behind me, its growls echoing through the night. I untied Duke and jumped onto his back, kicking him into a gallop. We raced across the pasture, the skinwalker hot on our heels. We reached the barn, and I jumped off, throwing the doors open and leading Duke inside. I slammed the doors shut and barred them, hoping it would keep the creature out. The skinwalker pounded on the doors, its growls growing louder and more frantic. I grabbed a pitchfork and stood ready, my hands shaking. The skinwalker eventually stopped pounding and began circling the barn, its eyes glowing through the cracks in the wood. It was testing the structure, looking for a way in. Hours passed, and the skinwalker didn't relent. I could hear it scraping at the walls, its growls filling the air. I knew I couldn't stay in the barn forever. I had to come up with a plan. I remembered a story my grandfather had told me about a skinwalker encounter H had when he was a young man. H managed to drive the creature away using fire. I looked around the barn and saw a lantern hanging on the wall. It was my only chance. I grabbed the lantern and lit it, then opened the doors just enough to slip outside. The skinwalker was waiting, its eyes fixed on me. I held the lantern out in front of me, the flames flickering in the night. "Stay back," I shouted again. The skinwalker hesitated, its eyes narrowing. I took a step forward, waving the lantern. The creature let out a hiss and backed away. I kept moving, pushing it back toward the trees. Finally, with a final growl, it turned and disappeared into the forest. I collapsed to the ground, my body shaking with relief. The skinwalker was gone, at least for now. I knew it could come back, but for the moment, I was safe. I spent the rest of the night in the barn, too afraid to return to the house. When dawn finally broke, I made my way back to the ranch, my mind still reeling from the encounter. I told Mike what had happened, and he listened with wide eyes. "We need to tell the elders," he said. "They'll know what to do." We went to the nearby reservation and spoke with the tribal elders. They took my story seriously and performed a cleansing ceremony to protect the ranch. They warned us to be vigilant and to respect the old traditions. The experience left a lasting mark on me. I continued to work the ranch, but I never forgot that night. The Skinwalker had shown me that there were things in this world that defied explanation, things that demanded respect. My name is Emily Davis, and I live in a small, picturesque town nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. Stone Creek is known for its rolling hills, dense forests, and an air of tranquility that draws tourists and nature enthusiasts year-round. My family has owned a cabin on the outskirts of town for generations. A rustic retreat where we would spend weekends hiking, fishing, and enjoying the natural beauty of the area. It was late autumn when the incident occurred, a time when the air was crisp and the leaves painted the landscape in shades of red, orange, and gold. My husband, Jack, and I decided to spend a long weekend at the cabin, hoping to unwind and reconnect with nature. Little did we know that our peaceful retreat would turn into a nightmare that we would never forget. We arrived at the cabin late on a Friday afternoon, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped below the horizon. The cabin was just as I remembered it, cozy and welcoming, with a stone fireplace and large windows that offered breathtaking views of the surrounding forest. We unpacked our bags and settled in, eager to relax after the long drive. As night fell, we built a fire and cooked a simple dinner, enjoying the warmth and the crackling of the flames. Afterward, we sat on the porch, sipping hot cocoa and listening to the sounds of the forest. It was a serene and idyllic setting, but there was an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite shake. Jack, have you ever heard any strange stories about this area? I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked at me with a raised eyebrow. Strange stories? Like what? Like legends or folklore? You know, spooky stuff. Jack chuckled. Well, there are plenty of ghost stories and tales of strange creatures, but nothing I'd take seriously. Why do you ask? I shrugged, trying to downplay my curiosity. I don't know, just something about this place feels different. Jack took a sip of his cocoa and looked out into the darkening forest. I wouldn't worry about it. We're miles away from civilization. It's probably just the isolation getting to you. I nodded, but the feeling of unease persisted. We decided to turn in early, hoping a good night's sleep would put my mind at ease. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of rustling outside the cabin. At first, I thought it was just an animal, but the noise grew louder and more deliberate. I sat up, my heart pounding, and listened intently. Jack was still sound asleep beside me, oblivious to the disturbance. The rustling grew closer, and I could hear heavy footsteps crunching through the fallen leaves. I got out of bed as quietly as possible and peeked through the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a figure unlike anything I had ever seen. It was tall and gaunt, with long, matted hair, and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. Its body was covered in tattered clothing and patches of fur, and its face was a grotesque blend of human and animal features. I realized with horror that I was looking at a skinwalker. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. The stories my grandmother had told me as a child came flooding back. She had warned me about the skinwalkers, witches who could take on the form of animals and wreak havoc on anyone who crossed their path. I had always dismissed her tales as superstition, but now was faced with the terrifying reality. I shook Jack awake, trying to stay calm. Jack, wake up. There's something outside. He groaned and rubbed his eyes. What are you talking about? There's something outside the cabin. I think it's a skinwalker. Jack sat up, his expression turning serious. Are you sure? I nodded, my voice trembling. Yes, I saw it. We need to do something. He got out of bed and grabbed the shotgun we kept for protection, checking to make sure it was loaded. Stay here, I'll go check it out. Jack, no, it's too dangerous. He gave me a reassuring look. I'll be fine, just stay inside and lock the door. I watched as he opened the door and stepped outside, the shotgun at the ready. I locked the door behind him and pressed my ear to the wood, straining to hear what was happening. There was a tense silence, broken only by the sound of Jack's footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, I heard a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. Jack shouted something, and there was a loud bang as he fired the shotgun. I heard more growling, followed by another shot. Then, everything went silent. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Minutes felt like hours as I stood there, frozen with fear. Finally, I heard Jack's voice calling out to me. "Emily, it's okay. You can come out now." I unlocked the door and stepped outside, my legs trembling. Jack was standing near the edge of the clearing, the shotgun still in his hands. The Skinwalker was gone, but there were signs of a struggle, broken branches and disturbed leaves. "What happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. Jack looked at me, his expression grim. I scared it off, but it could come back. "We need to leave now." We packed our things as quickly as possible and left the cabin, driving through the night to get back to town. The experience left us both shaken, and we decided to avoid the cabin for a while. A few weeks later, spoke with an elder from the local Cherokee tribe. I told him what had happened, and he listened carefully, nodding as I described the encounter. "You were wise to leave," he said. "Skinwalkers are powerful and dangerous. They can sense fear and will exploit it. But they can be driven away with fire and bravery." He performed a cleansing ceremony to protect us and our property, and we returned to the cabin only during the day. The encounter left a lasting mark on us, a reminder of the power and mystery of the natural world. My name is Carlos Mendez, and I work as a park ranger in the vast, rugged terrain of the Grand Canyon National Park. It's a job I've loved for the past decade, allowing me to spend my days among some of the most breathtaking landscapes on Earth. I've always had a deep respect for nature, but one fateful encounter forever changed my perception of the wilderness and its hidden dangers. It was early November, and the park was quieter than usual. The summer crowds had long since dispersed, and only a few hardy tourists remained, braving the chilly winds and the occasional snowfall. I was on my usual patrol, driving along the remote dirt roads that crisscross the park's more secluded areas. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light over the canyons, cliffs, and the winding Colorado River far below. As I rounded a bend, I spotted a solitary hiker making his way down a narrow trail that led to a lesser-known overlook. Something about his movements seemed off, hesitant and jerky, as if he were struggling with an invisible weight. I pulled over and got out of my truck, calling out to him. "Hey there, everything okay?" The hiker froze and slowly turned to face me. His eyes were wild, and his face was gaunt and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Ranger, you've got to help me," he said, his voice trembling. "Something's following me, something not human." I frowned and walked closer, trying to reassure him. "Calm down, sir. Let's get you back to the ranger station. You can tell me what happened there." He shook his head violently. "No, we can't go back. It's out there. It's been watching me. I can feel it." A chill ran down my spine. Over the years, it heard my fair share of strange stories from hikers and campers, but something about this man's terror struck a chord. I decided to take him seriously. "All right, let's get you to safety first. My truck is right over here." We climbed into the truck, and I started driving back towards the ranger station. The hiker introduced himself as Peter Lawson, a travel writer from New York. He'd come to the Grand Canyon for inspiration, but had ended up with more than he'd bargained for. As we drove, Peter told me his story. He'd been camping alone near the rim of the canyon when he started noticing strange noises at night, whispers carried on the wind, footsteps crunching in the gravel, and shadows moving just beyond the reach of his campfire's light. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger each night. On the fourth night, He'd woken up to find his campsite in disarray. His tent had been slashed, and his supplies scattered. That's when H seen I'd a figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. H fled, abandoning most of his gear, and had been wandering the trails ever since, trying to stay ahead of whatever was stalking him. As he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The road ahead seemed darker, and the shadows longer than usual. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following us. We finally reached the ranger station, and I helped Peter inside. The station was empty, as most of my colleagues had gone home for the night. I offered him a cup of coffee and a blanket, trying to make him comfortable. "Stay here," I said. "I'm going to call for backup." I stepped outside to get a better signal on my radio. As I tried to reach the nearest ranger post, I heard a faint rustling in the bushes nearby. I turned, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, but saw nothing. The wind picked up, carrying with it a low, haunting whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I quickly made the call and headed back inside, my nerves on edge. Peter was sitting by the window, staring out into the darkness. "It's here," he said softly. "It followed us. Re." I tried to reassure him, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I locked the doors and made sure all the windows were secure. We sat in silence, the tension thick in the air. Hours passed, and the night grew colder. Just as I was beginning to think we might make it through unscathed, there was a loud bang on the roof. Peter and I both jumped, our eyes wide with fear. I grabbed my flashlight and gestured for Peter to stay put. I climbed the ladder to the attic and cautiously opened the hatch. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but dust and cobwebs. I was about to close the hatch when I heard a low, guttural growl, followed by the sound of something scraping against the wood. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the attic, but there was no sign of the intruder. I climbed back down and found Peter cowering in the corner. "What was it?" he whispered. "I don't know," I admitted, "but whatever it is, it's trying to scare us." We spent the rest of the night huddled together, listening to the strange noises that seemed to come from all around us. Just before dawn, the sound stopped, and an eerie silence settled over the station. We were exhausted, but too afraid to sleep. When the sun finally rose, I ventured outside to inspect the area. There were no signs of footprints or any indication that something had been on the roof. It was as if the night's events had been a bad dream. Peter and I decided to leave the park and head back to civilization. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time and saw a figure, standing at the edge of the forest, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. We never spoke of that night again, but the memory haunted me for years. I continued my work as a park ranger, always keeping an eye out for anything unusual. The wilderness is a place of beauty and mystery, but it also holds dangers that defy explanation. To this day, I share my story with others, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the natural world. The legends of the Skinwalkers are not just tales to be dismissed, they are warnings. Reminders that there are forces in the world that we do not fully understand. And as long as we respect those forces, we can coexist with the wild and untamed beauty of Natu. My name is James Hartman, and I'm a retired police officer living in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Elkhorn is a small, quiet town surrounded by dense woods and farmland. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and nothing much ever happens, at least, that's what I used to think. In the fall of 1992, I had an experience that changed my life forever, an encounter with something that defied all logic and reason. I had always prided myself on my rationality and my ability to stay calm under pressure. But that night, all my training and experience meant nothing. It was a cold, clear night in late October. The air was crisp, and the sky was dotted with stars. I was driving home after a late shift, taking the back roads to avoid the main highway. The route took me down Bray Road, a narrow, winding road that cut through the woods on the outskirts of town. As I drove, I thought about nothing in particular, enjoying the solitude and the peacefulness of the night. Suddenly, my headlights caught something up ahead, something that made me slam on the brakes. Standing in the middle of the road was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with a muscular, humanoid body covered in dark, matted fur. Its face was a grotesque blend of human and canine features, with glowing yellow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Its hands or paws ended in long, sharp claws, and its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen in shock and disbelief. The creature stared back at me, unblinking and unmoving. Then, with a low, menacing growl, it took a step towards my car. I snapped out of my daze and fumbled for my radio, my hands shaking. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hartman. I'm on Bray Road, and there's something," I trailed off, unsure of how to describe what I was seeing. The creature took another step closer, and I could see its muscles ripple under its fur. It was clearly a predator, and I had no doubt that it could easily tear me apart if it wanted to. I threw the car into reverse and backed up as quickly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature followed, moving with the speed and grace that belied its size. It was almost as if it was toying with me, enjoying the chase. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, the creature stopped and let out a blood-curdling howl. I slammed on the brakes again and watched as it turned and disappeared into the woods. Its glowing eyes, the last thing I saw before it vanished into the darkness. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My rational mind struggled to make sense of it, but there was no logical explanation for what I had seen. I knew I had encountered the beast of Bray Road, a creature that had been the subject of local legends and rumors for years. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. When I got home, I poured myself a stiff drink and tried to calm my nerves. I knew I had to report the incident, but I also knew that no one would believe me. I could already imagine the ridicule and disbelief I would face. The next morning, I went to the station and filed my report, leaving out the more unbelievable details. I described the creature as a large, unidentified animal and requested an investigation. My colleagues were skeptical, but they agreed to check it out. Over the next few days, there were several more sightings of the creature, and the story quickly spread through the town. People were scared, and the local media had a field day with the reports. The beast of Bray Road had become more than just a legend. It was now a very real and terrifying presence in our community. The hours passed slowly, and I began to doubt my plan. Just as I was about to call it a night, I heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. I grabbed my camera and aimed it at the sound, my finger hovering over the shutter button. Out of the darkness, the creature emerged, moving silently and gracefully. I snapped several photos, my hands shaking with excitement and fear. The creature paused, its ears twitching as if it sensed my presence. Then, with a growl, it turned and bounded back into the woods. I knew I had to act quickly. I grabbed the tranquilizer gun and followed, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature's glowing eyes were like beacons in the darkness, guiding me through the dense underbrush. I finally caught up to it in a small clearing, and without hesitation, I aimed and fired. The tranquilizer dart hit the creature in the shoulder, and it let out a roar of pain and anger. It turned to face me, its eyes burning with rage. For a moment, I thought it was going to attack, but then its movements became sluggish, and it stumbled. I watched as it collapsed to the ground, its breathing heavy and labored. I approached cautiously, my adrenaline still pumping. Up close, the creature was even more terrifying, its massive frame dwarfing me. I took several more photos, documenting every detail. I knew I had to get help, but I also knew that time was running out. I radioed for backup and waited, keeping a close eye on the creature. As the tranquilizer took full effect, its breathing slowed, and it slipped into unconsciousness. When my colleagues arrived, we carefully loaded the creature into a transport cage and took it to a secure location. The news of its capture spread quickly, and soon the town was buzzing with excitement and curiosity. The creature was examined by experts, who were baffled by its existence. It was unlike any known species, a true enigma. Theories ranged from a genetic mutation to a creature from another dimension, but no one could say for sure. I spent the next few weeks patrolling the area, hoping to catch another glimpse of the creature and gather more evidence. But despite my efforts, it remained elusive, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. One night, I decided to take a different approach. I set up a stakeout near the area where I had first seen the creature, armed with a camera and a tranquilizer gun. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. Despite the mystery, one thing was certain: Beast of Bray Road was real, and it had left a lasting impact on our community. The sightings and encounters continued to be a topic of fascination and fear, a reminder that there are still many unknowns in our world. As for me, I retired from the police force a few years later, but the memory of that night remains vivid in my mind. I often think about the creature and what it represented: a glimpse into the unknown. A reminder that there are still mysteries to be uncovered. I continue to share my story, hoping to raise awareness and encourage respect for the natural world. The Beast of Bray Road is a symbol of the wild and untamed, a reminder that there are forces beyond our understanding. And as long as we respect those forces, we can coexist with the beauty and mystery of nature.